Welcome to Around the Paul. It is Florida State week. The Seminoles are heading to Death Valley, and the Clemson Tigers will be back at home for what promises to be one of the biggest games this season, and I would dare to say the biggest up until this point. And we're going to talk all about it here on this week's episode. As always, I'm Garrett Mitchell, joined by Griffin Barfield, Clifton Kennedy, and our special guest this evening from the Double Fries No Slaw podcast, TJ Pittenger. And we're so happy to have TJ here with us tonight. He's going to help break things down from the Florida State perspective. We're going to talk a little bit of football and the big game coming up at 12 noon at Death Valley this Saturday. So, TJ, welcome in. Glad to have you, man.
Yeah, thank you guys for having us. And thanks for getting the name right, too. I've had people say, like, double slaw, no fries. And I'm like, how do you screw that up? Like logic itself should tell you that that's a terrible way to mess that up. So, no, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And, let's just jump right into this. This is a game coming up on Saturday that everybody here in upstate of South Carolina that are Clemson fans, of course, everybody down in Tallahassee and Florida State fans everywhere have had circled on their calendar for a long time. And the date is finally here. And maybe not quite under the circumstances that everybody had imagined they would be, perhaps two undefeated teams coming in. And that's thanks to Clemson's season opening loss to Duke. But meanwhile, the Seminoles have been taking care of business, and they've certainly looked the part more or less this season. So, what's the prevailing thoughts going on now around the Florida State program that you've been able to see and hear? And, what's the lead up to this game, and what are people saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Florida State, I mean, you came out against LSU and with the only game on TV, I mean, you just kind of took them out to the woodshed. I mean, I think that put a pretty good taste in people's mouths and really got them pretty hyped up. And then, you kind of continued that with a big win against Southern Miss, but you did kind of struggle against Boston College. And, I think there's probably an aspect of that looking ahead to what you feel like is the biggest, game of the year upcoming here this weekend. But I mean, in the lead up to this game, I mean, a lot of people are picking Florida State. I mean, it's been trendy. And then, a lot of people watch the first 6 quarters of Clemson season and then probably haven't watched the last 6 quarters of Clemson season. And so, I think Florida State fans know that, like, Clemson's not an unranked team. Like, Clemson's not there's no way that Florida or Tennessee or some of these dumb teams at the bottom of there's no way that Clemson wouldn't be a 10-point favorite against any of those teams right now on a neutral field. And so I think there's that respect, and there's that, hey, we haven't won this game since Jameis was in school, right? He didn't play in the game, but it's been a long time since Florida State's won this game. And so there's a confidence amongst Florida State fans, and they certainly would tell you, like, hey, I think we're going to win, but nobody's taking Clemson lightly in this one.
Yeah, and I think if the roles were reversed, the same could be said, because it was once a position that we were in as well before the run of championship contention started. It was Clemson that was looking up, dreaming of beating Florida State. And then when that day finally came, it's been 7 straight times that Clemson has won this ball game. But I think it's a precarious position because, as you said on your own podcast, I don't know that anybody fully knows what you're getting with Clemson right now, because the only quality opponent that you have to go on was that Duke game. And, of course, that did not end very well. Sure, you scored 66 points against Charleston Southern. You beat Florida Atlantic 48-14. But what can you really judge based on those 2 ball games? So, Griffin, let's jump to you, man. And just from what you've seen in your own campus, and you hear everybody talk, and you've got that firsthand view. Certainly things have looked a little bit better, particularly offensively, the last 2 games. But really, how much can you actually glean from what they've done against the competition they've played?
Right. And I think the biggest thing were, the first half of this Florida Atlantic game and the second half of the Charleston Southern game. I think, it truly showed the potential that Clemson could play up to. And I think, especially around campus, going into this matchup, there's tension. I will say that there are a lot of people, that are still like, we don't know what's going to happen. But I think that people are a lot more confident. I'm more confident in the team when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. I thought Cade and Co were moving the ball pretty well. The second half was a little bit more on the iffier side, but it gave me a lot more confidence about, facing a Florida State team that, is almost a must. It is a must win in this situation.
And Clifton, you, as Griffin talked about, you saw the offensive fluidity in the first half against Florida Atlantic, and it was encouraging to see Klubnik going over the middle to receivers, trying to go vertical and open that offense up more. But then it did appear that there was another regression in the second half. So did you take that as more of, you've got a big lead, 34-0, and they're just kind of coasting to the finish line, or were you really hoping to see the foot stay on the throat there in the third and fourth quarters?
I think you're always wanting to see them put the foot on the throat and, pedal to the metal all the way through the game. But I do think there was a little bit of, we got this game under control, and but there was also that sense of, he did struggle a little bit in the third quarter, and that's something you don't want to see. But, I think we did see progression each game, and we're getting better each game. But coming up to this Florida State game this weekend, you can't make mistakes like that. And, even if you're up 34-0, I don't care. Florida State's good. So, even if we're beating them that bad, we still got to keep our foot on the throat. So, yeah, I think we'll be fine,
Right, and TJ, and it was kind of the same for you guys, at least from my vantage point against Boston College. You had a big lead, 31-10, and then it seemed like in the second half, be it just either taking your foot off the gas or some mental mistakes or whatever the case may be, Florida or Boston College gets back into that ball game and really takes it to the wire late. So was that did you feel like that the Seminoles just kind of deaccelerated a little bit too early there? Were there some things from your perspective that were maybe a bit concerning that need to be fixed going into this week?
Yeah, I think it was a mix of a couple of things. I went back and kind of rewatched and broke down the 17 minutes that Boston College scored all their points, right? Well, besides the 10 in the first quarter. So, man, it was just mental lapse or mental mistake after mental mistake. It was, the Noles are going for it on a 4th and 4, and they have a wide receiver lineup in the neutral zone. And so they got an offsides on the offense. I don't think I've seen that called in years, right? And then, Boston College on the next drive converts a 3rd and 17. They score a touchdown there, and the Noles drop a pooch kick, the next drive, Florida State fumbles 6s because a guy misses. He goes out to run a route as opposed to staying and blocking on the screen. If he blocks on the screen, there was nobody on the other side of the field. I'm not saying he takes it to the house or not, but he runs for a long time. And so it was just like mental mistake after mental mistake after mental mistake. And they were all kind of bunched together. Now, I don't know if that's a sign of just, man, something snowballed and got out of control, or probably a little bit of, man, we were up 31-10. You probably relax a little bit. You probably start thinking about Clemson a little bit. You feel like you've probably done your job. And if you'd maybe just gotten one more touchdown, then it'd have probably been fine to do. But yeah, I think a little bit of both. I don't think anything that's like super concerning long-term, more of just, hey, you're glad that wake-up call happened against BC and not this weekend in Death Valley.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, when you look at the game this week, certainly – the Seminoles have playmakers all over the field. And here at Clemson, I think we've got players that I think we certainly feel like are capable of being those dynamic playmakers, maybe that we haven't fully seen them flash to their potential yet. But, I think it all goes out the window when you've got a game of this magnitude. It's a rivalry game, and both teams know what's on the line. They know what's at stake. But, let's talk about some of these playmakers that are going to be on the field Saturday. And certainly for Florida State, you've got a pretty good set there with Jordan Travis at quarterback, Benson at running back, and Coleman at wide receiver. But it goes deeper than that. There are a lot of options for the Seminoles offense that Clemson has to be wary of.
Yeah, I think that, Florida State's size out there at wideout is pretty ridiculous. And I think Clemson's the best on our schedule to match up with it. I think Clemson is the best secondary and has the most length in the secondary. But I don't know how anybody truly shuts it down. Keon Coleman that you mentioned has been on an absolute tear. Johnny Wilson was the wide receiver 1 last year at 6'6", 6'7", and he's a matchup nightmare for sure. Jaheim Bell is the only kid on the team that knows what it's like to beat Clemson, and he's been a freak, every game this year, just completely unguardable matchup nightmare. They really like their stable of running backs with Trey Benson and Lawrence Toafili. Clemson fans may remember him from the game 2 years ago. He's the one that should have been down, but barrel rolled and landed on the guy's back and got up and kept running. So he's back and 2 years older and more experienced too. And then the cog that kind of makes it all go is Jordan Travis, who is sitting there at like 4th right now in Heisman odds. So they certainly do have a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. And they can certainly be a matchup nightmare when all those guys are clicking.
Right. And TJ, I like that you mentioned the Clemson secondary as well. And Griffin, you look at the Tigers secondary and the back end of that defense, and it was a unit that last year really was a very much maligned part of the Clemson defense. And you had players like Nate Wiggins, who you hearken back to the Wake Forest game in 2022, and it was just not a good showing at all. But you see a lot of those players who were young, inexperienced guys last year who have really grown up. And it was the secondary, I thought, that really set the tone defensively against Florida Atlantic. Nate Wiggins with the pick 6 on the 4th play of the ball game. And, if those guys really have truly entered that final stage of the maturation process, they do have good size. And as TJ said, probably the best unit to match up with these big Florida State receivers. But if they've reached the end of that maturation process, then it'll have to manifest in a big way on Saturday.
Right. And one of the biggest things that I've seen, especially from the Clemson secondary, that is very different from last season was the opportunity to make big plays. Obviously, I'll take Wake Forest last year as the prime example that the big play after big play after big play hurt us. And I think that there has been not a lot of big plays that, those stretch plays, 20, 25 yards passing. And I think that just comes with the maturity and, just being healthy. I know Andrew Makuba, I believe, is on the day-to-day. He's missed the last 2 games, but he's expected to be back, which is huge. And not only that, I think the depth is huge as well. I think, like Clemson has always been, it's been a plug-and-play type team. Next man up, you maybe get a sophomore every now and then. But I honestly think that, John, I think these guys are these Florida State receivers are absolute unicorns of talent. I mean, you saw what Keon Coleman did week 1. So, this is probably the biggest test of the year when it comes to the receivers. And, do I think Clemson will step up? Yes, but I think that, you can't underestimate these guys because they will make you pay.
And Clifton, this is really just it's a contrasting of styles, if you will, when it comes to this Florida State team and the Clemson Tigers. It's, Dabo Swinney's vision of how a team should be built, staying loyal to your guys, developing them, having them for 4 or 5 years. And then a Florida State team and Coach Norvell that is really just supplemented and built up around the roster that he had with elite guys from the transfer portal. And so, Clifton, in your mind, do you see this as kind of a battle of the philosophies on Saturday and which one's going to win out? Does that play into this at all?
I don't think it does. I think it boils down to, who plays the best, and can the secondary of Clemson hold off those receivers, and can Klubnik, not make dumb throws, and I do think our defense, our secondary has gotten better since last year. We haven't really given up any big plays, and we've definitely seen progression throughout every game. So I don't really think it comes down to who has a transfer and who's loyal to what players. You just got to go out and play your best and stick to the game plan. And whoever makes less mistakes is probably going to win the ball game. I think the turnover margin, that's something that I think Clemson really has to get better at, and I think we did well last game. And I think that was probably the first game of the season that we won the turnover battle. So I really think that's going to probably whoever makes less turnovers is going to win this game. I mean,
yeah, and it's 11. It's our best 11 versus Florida State's best 11, and that's just it's how you have to approach this game going in. And as you said, fewest mistakes, whoever takes care of the ball and makes the most plays are going to win. And TJ, look, from the Florida State perspective, we've talked about the weapons, or you talked about the weapons that Florida State has and who Clemson has to be mindful of. But flipping that coin around to the other side, who are some of the players for the Tigers that Florida State, in your mind, has to be wary of? You've got Cade Klubnik, and, of course, his first full season starting, a young quarterback still developing. I'm sure nothing more that Coach Norvell and the Seminoles defense are going to want to try to fluster him early, bring some early pressure, and maybe try to force him to make some mistakes and keep the ball out of the hands of those guys on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, I think Cade at times looked really good. I mean, you guys know this better than I have, but at times looked great, and times he's looked, not very comfortable at all. And in that Duke game, he didn't look good. But going back to last year, I mean, he did look good at times against Power 5 and ACC opponents, and so you'd like to certainly get in his face as much as you can. I mean, Jared Verse and some of that defensive line that pretty could be pretty epic when they kind of get up and get going, that came back this year and kind of forewent the NFL draft. Yeah, I mean, I think getting after it is going to be huge. I mean, as far as like who Florida State's worried about, I mean, I think we're all ready for Will Shipley to not, be at Clemson anymore. I mean, he's been a killer for years against us. And so I've on our show that we just did not too long ago, it was we do the prize pick, we have a thing with prize picks. And so we pick them more or less for every stat line, and everything Will Shipley's in. It could be like number of times he's going to tie a sheet on, like more, touchdown more, 80 rushing yards, more, doesn't matter. Give me the more. So anyway, I think that's probably, who Florida State is the most, kind of weary of. I think they know Phil's really good too. And I think Clemson's going to try to establish the run as much as they can. If they've got to rely on the pass, it could be a long day for the Tigers. So I think that's where Florida State's focus is right now, is to really try and limit as much of that as you can. I'm never going to sit here and think that they're going to shut Will Shipley down. But if they can limit it as much as they can, I think they'd be pretty happy with the performance.
Yeah, and, in terms of relying on the passing game, and that's been a problem for us the last 2 seasons, is being able to hit that big play from the wide receiver position and having guys who can get open behind the defense and really help take the top off. And I think it was perhaps even a concern especially a concern after the Duke game on Labor Day Monday. But then you start to see some guys flash and some guys emerged, and one of those is a true freshman, Tyler Brown, and he's actually a local product from here, Greenville, South Carolina, Greenville High School, just about 40 minutes or so from Clemson. And this is a young man that finally has the speed and has shown the ability to be able to get behind defenses and aid in that vertical passing game. So, I certainly think that having scored 2 touchdowns last week would be somebody the Seminoles would have to watch out for as well. But Griffin, seeing what Tyler Brown has been able to do, not only at the receiver position, but in the punt return game as well. He's had 2 punt returns of 40-plus and 60-plus yards. He's bringing another element and a dynamic element to this offense that maybe Clemson fans weren't aware that we had going into the season.
Right, and I think one of Clemson's biggest downfalls this season, most importantly, is special teams. And, I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but, I think a punt return of 20, 30 yards is incredibly beneficial to an offense on any team. And not only that, I think, Tyler Brown can serve as an X factor for this game. I mean, looking at Florida State, what you're getting out of guys like Bo Collins. What you're getting out of Shipley, obviously. You're putting every single body on him. Same thing with, maybe Antonio Williams as well. But I think Tyler Brown can go under the radar. You're looking at a guy who did catch 2 touchdowns last week and, has just shown constant production and has gotten the ball more and more. So for me, I think, if Tyler Brown can, continue to bring in punt returns, not muff the punt like he did. I believe he did against FAU. I think you're looking at a guy that, all you have to do with the offense is, string a couple first downs together and bam, you're in field goal range. But, we have struggled there too. But I think it's just hugely beneficial to have a spark, whether in the special teams field, whether in the receiving core. It's just really nice to have that guy.
Yeah, and Clifton, Clemson fans, we all had to be wondering, oh, God, here we go again, when we got the news earlier this week that Cole Turner, who was a young man, he was a starter, an established starter coming into this season. We really saw the ACC championship game against North Carolina last year, what that young man was capable of. And by all metrics, he was probably the fastest, if not one of the top 2 fastest wide receivers on the team. And then we get the news that he tore 3 abductor muscles against Florida Atlantic, and he's done for the season. So there's been so much attrition at wide receiver over the last 2 seasons that when you come into a game against an opponent, the quality of Florida State, you have to be thinking, oh no, here we go again. We can't be losing these guys. We have to stay healthy.
Yeah. It was sad news that, we found out that, he's out for the season. But, I think Tyler Brown can pick up where he left off, considering what he did last game, scoring those 2 touchdowns. I think he only had 3 receptions for and 2 touchdowns. It's crazy. And it was less than 50 yards, but and he had 2 touchdowns. So if he can pick up those numbers a little bit more in the reception area, and I think he can be that guy that steps up. And one guy that I want to see step up that we haven't seen step up is Adam Randall.
Yes.
He's kind of, where's he been? Right,
you hear so much about him. We've heard so much about him, only to have him really conspicuously absent for the most part in all the first 3 games.
Yeah, and so I would like to see him step up a little bit, but I think we'll be okay at receiver. I know it sucks to have Cole Turner out for the season, but like I said, I think we'll have some people step up and we'll be okay. Like I said, I think this game's going to come down to, it's going to be a field goal game. I don't think it's going to be 2 touchdowns or anything like that. It's going to be a super close game. So,
well, and I agree with you 100%. And I've thought all week that this could come down to a special teams play or a field goal or a kick late if the game goes as I think many feel like it could, especially if the Tigers show up ready to play and play mistake-free football. But speaking of conspicuously absent, let's talk about the special teams in the Clemson kicking game. And TJ, I know you watch this from afar and you pay attention to some of the more minute details, but needless to say, the place kicking game for the Tigers has been it has been not good to downright bad in the first 3 games, to the point that Dabo was forced to go out and, as he put it, call a guy in from the bullpen. And he went out and got a place kicker that had been on the team, is a graduate student now, thought he'd given up football, and now he's not only back on the team, he's going to start on Saturday. So if that gives any indication of how shaky the place kicking game has been. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Florida State struggled with some place kicking stuff last year. They weren't super sharp. Massive hat tip to Ryan Fitzgerald, our kicker now, who is perfect on the season, knock on wood. It's probably not a good game to say that going into, but but then we look at Clemson, we're like, well, at least we're not doing that, right?
It can always be worse, right?
Yeah, as bad as we had it last year. So I don't know. The other side of that is this kid will probably have a walk-off field goal to win it, and they'll make another Disney movie about it. So I don't know. I'm not very excited about the fact that this kid is kicking for y'all. Doesn't this just seem like a Disney story? Where this is going to screw FSU. It's like Kurt Warner getting called off the public shelves, to go win a Super Bowl. It's like, nah, man, just go find somebody in the locker room that can already kick, Dabo, because I don't need this setting up this way for me. So
yeah, and see, this guy was he was down on the beach outside of Charleston somewhere when Dabo picked up the phone and called him. So he's got to be thinking to himself, my God. I'm sitting here down on the beach just doing my master's degree online, and now I've got to come up here and get ready in 5 or 6 days. They go out and kick against the Florida State Seminoles. Lucky me.
The only reason that Dabo even knew about him is because somebody told him that he was enrolled in graduate school, and that's just hilarious to me. And he called him up and said, "Hey, we need you." And the way Dabo tells it is he hung up and said, "Let me go kick a few kicks." And then he called him back and said, "I'm ready to go." And I'm like, "Are you serious? Is this serious?" But yeah, I mean, whatever works, whatever works. If it, I mean, we were struggling. I still think Robert Gunn's going to be a great kicker for us. He does well at kickoffs, and but he's just a little shaky when it comes to field goals. Like Dabo said, he kicks a field goal like he kicks a kickoff, and you just can't do that.
Yeah, well, Griffin, I know this. You're a soccer player. You were a soccer player. So, you know what? You could have gone out there and just thrown your name into the hat, too, and just said, here, put the tee down. Let me try to kick a few and give it a go. And we really could have been getting the inside scoop on everything happening at practice.
Oh, no, I've told my friends, I'm like, put me in, coach. Like, let me kick a soccer ball through a field goal and see how I feel. So. But no, it's a cool story. Like TJ said, maybe Disney ending type thing, but obviously we'll see. And it's a cool story though. It's pretty funny, I will say.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. If it winds up, if it plays out like that, if it winds up being a Disney movie, then I'll be first in line to buy a ticket at the movie theaters. So
I'm not watching it. I'm not doing it.
We'll pay for your ticket, I promise.
No.
I don't blame you.
Well, I tell you what, though, we're less than 3 days away now from this ball game. So, let's talk about some advantages and disadvantages, as we kind of put some final thoughts on this matchup. TJ, let's start with you in the Florida State side of things. Is there anywhere that stands out that maybe is a weaker part of the Florida State team that maybe Clemson could capitalize on, and then vice versa? We'll talk about some areas I think where Florida State could potentially take advantage of some Clemson weaknesses as well.
Yeah, I'd say the weakest part of Florida State's team, maybe this isn't great for – I guess it's all perspective, right? Glass half full or glass half empty. Florida State's weakness is definitely secondary. And so I know that Clemson's wide receivers certainly wouldn't be described as a strength right now of the team. But if there's anything that can help wide receivers that are struggling, it might be a secondary that's got some issues. Akeem Dent is a starting safety. He's a fifth-year player that seemed like a hamstring. Florida State's pretty quiet about injuries, but where he was grabbing and just what I've been told, it seemed like a hamstring. Didn't play last week. I'm not sure if he gets in or not this week. I think he will, but I don't have like 100% confirmation. And hamstrings are weird. Like he could tweak it on series 1 or series 8, so their depth there isn't very good. So anyway, secondary is probably a place that, again, I know that's not Clemson's strong suit, but a place they might be able to take advantage. I like Clemson's front seven a lot. And I think that Florida State's offensive line is probably the best it's been since 2013. But it's still not what I would call elite by any means. I mean, I think it's very good. I think it's top 20 in the country. But I don't think it's top 5, right? It's not UGA. And so I think that Clemson's front seven defensive line, if they're clicking, they could certainly make some noise there. I think Florida State did really well against LSU's defensive line. So they certainly do have the propensity to take on an elite defensive line and slow them down. But if I'm Clemson, the places you're not going to attack Florida State's wide receivers. You're not going to attack, Florida State's defensive line. So those would be the two areas that I would try and attack. The offensive line, it's not bad by any means, but it's probably the weakest part of the offense. And then, the secondary on the other side.
And Griffin, conversely, Florida State, of course, with an offense that can just keep coming at you in waves. And as TJ pointed out, yes, the Clemson defensive line it's very good and probably easily a top 7 to 10 team in the country, if not by some measurables, top 5 or 6. It's a very good unit. The linebackers are very good. We've known that going in. It's a proven commodity. But one thing that front seven for the Tigers is deep. There's not a lot of depth outside of that first wave of guys. And so does it become a concern that Florida State, if they're able, especially if they're able to keep guys fresh on offense, that it does eventually have the potential to wear down the Tigers front seven?
I think it does, especially, if the Seminoles get up. And, they have the very good chance of doing that. You shake up Cade in the first and second quarter, and all of a sudden, you're just running the ball down the throat. You're up, maybe a touchdown or 10 points, and, you're just running down the clock. And that could be something where, Florida State are putting in guys, while Clemson, you can't give that depth because all you're going to do is just continue to move the chains. So for me, I think that definitely that could be a weak aspect, but the majority of it is you have to stay in the game, and you have to keep, Travis throwing the ball, not running the ball, chewing the clock, that type thing, and having the force to make the big plays in order to either try to help Florida State take the lead, or have to rally back. So as long as you're not pushing like an uphill running back game, I think that you'll be good when it comes to depth.
Yeah, and I think coaches will tell you, especially from a schematic standpoint, offensively too, when you break down some of the X's and O's of this matchup, coaches will tell you that they prefer to set up the pass off of the run. They want to establish the run first. But if you do go into the game subscribing to the notion that the weakest part of the Seminoles defense is the secondary, Clifton, could you potentially see that reverse this week and maybe try to get Cade going early and get him into a rhythm in the passing game, and then try to set up the run off of the pass and just go in reverse?
I mean, I think you could, because I think for Cade to be great, he has to. I mean, I guess this could be for any quarterback, but especially for Cade, the way he's looked the past couple of games, you need to get him, a few passes underneath his belt, and pretty easy passes. So, I mean, you could see that, but knowing Clemson and how they are and how Dabo is, he's going to want to run the ball to set up the pass. And, but who knows, I mean, you just don't know. But from what we've seen so far, I think it's going to be, the run's going to set up the pass. And I think we have three good running backs, that, that could, because I think Dominique Thomas, I've been high on Dominique Thomas all year, and TJ probably never even heard of the guy, but
no comment.
Yeah, and
just watch our games deep into the fourth quarter. Either we're getting blown out, we're up, or we're up by 6 or 7 touchdowns. You'll see him.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, but I mean, I think it's going to be run's going to set up the pass, because we want to get that running game going. Yeah,
and TJ, we've got to touch on this before we finish up tonight. Clemson and Florida State, big time hyped up matchup, and a 12 noon kickoff. Really, it seems disrespectful to both teams.
Yeah, I mean, and I get why some of these things happen, right? And I don't even know if Florida State fans are pissed off at Clemson fans not Clemson fans, but Clemson for losing to Duke, because they're like, we were going to get game day and, all this other stuff.
Oh, it would have been.
And so I get it. Although noon is a lot better on my nerves than, I'm going to the game. I'm flying out on Friday morning. So I don't know. When I'm watching at home, 8 p.m. is great. When I'm going, I'm just like, get this crap over with. So I'm all right with it, to be honest with you. Don't tell the FSU fans that I said that. But yeah, I mean, and I'll never, rely on the ACC to do anything well or fight for us to, be in a primetime spot where we should be. So, I'll blame them because they're an easy target. And, when we play this game in 3 or 4 years, we won't even be here. So there's the silver lining for that noon kickoff, I guess.
Yeah, just glass half full. Well, we're not going to look at this as glass half empty. We're going to make the best of whatever the circumstance may be. So, all right, we're going to leave it at that. We're going to wrap this up for this week's episode of Around the Paul. But before we do, we're just going to go straight down the line from left to right and some X factors for Saturday. What has to happen for either the Tigers or the Seminoles to win? TJ, we're going to give you I'll start. So we're going to give you the last word as our special guest tonight. And we appreciate you being on with us. But my X factor is, and I touched on this just a second ago, it's got to be a fast start. To me, Florida State's not a team that you can afford to get behind early and attempt to have to play catch up, even at home, even in front of a partisan crowd. You have to set the tone and get that momentum early. And I think if Clemson's able to do that, I think we could see a game that is goes the duration well into the fourth quarter. And if not, then, it could very well end up being a 2014 type game. And I have nightmares of that one. I won't even mention that score. But So, we hope that it's not anything, at least from our perspective, something along those lines. But certainly a fast start for the Tigers is imperative.
Right. And for me, I think, similar to that, you have to get Cade comfortable at least in the first quarter. You can't have, this Florida State team bang him up, make some bad passes, might not be able to, link up with, Will Shipley or any of the receivers. So I think that's imperative. But all I'll say is this, which is, exciting. The last time Clemson was a home underdog was the 2016 game against Louisville. Garrett, obviously you put that as your top for Rockin' the Valley. With on the website.
I was there.
So I'm expecting a fireworks of a game. I'm really excited for this game, and I think it's going to be close no matter what. So it might end up being a last possession type of game.
Yeah, I think this might be a cop out, but I think it's going to be Tyler Brown, and the receiving core. Yeah. I mean, he's just a hot topic right now, right, for Clemson, and I think whoever on the defense, I think whoever is on the opposite side of Nate Wiggins, whoever that is, needs to have a big game. Whether that's I can't remember who's in front of Toriano Pride, but whoever is on that opposite side needs to have a big game, because Nate Wiggins is going to step up and be a dog. But yeah, on offense, I think it's Tyler Brown and the receivers, and then on defense, whoever that opposite side of Nate Wiggins is.
Yeah, so I don't want to be cliche either, right? Like, I feel like you always just end up saying like whoever wins. I think Dabo's got a lot of merit to what he says with the turnover battle. I think he's pretty spot on there. I don't mean to sound like such a homer, but I do think if both of these teams play an A game, I think Florida State's slightly better. Like, I think they win by like 4-7, right? Maybe it sounds like a super homer thing, but I just think they have a little bit more talent at some of the matchup places that could potentially happen. And if Jordan Travis is playing an A game, then there aren't many teams in the country that Florida State's going to lose to. So yeah, I think the turnover thing is big. If any team was to win that by like 2, or obviously lose that by 2, I don't see a way that they could win this game. But yeah, to me, it probably comes down to who I just mentioned. I mean, I think it comes down to Jordan Travis and Cade Klubnik. And, I like my chances there if I'm Florida State. I don't think Jordan's been super, super sharp this year, but even without being super sharp, he's been, pretty good. And so I think it truly does come down to what the quarterbacks are able to do. I don't expect Florida State to be able to run the ball super, super well against that Clemson front. I think Clemson will run the ball okay, but I think they will get a point in the game where they are going to have to rely on Cade. I mean, I don't necessarily think that, Shipley and all these guys are going to go off for like 350 on the ground or anything. So I think it comes down to quarterback play, and that probably gives me a little bit of confidence that it probably tilts Florida State's way if you don't have turnovers like Dabo said.
Is he still hurt?
So it's my favorite. I'll answer that with a movie quote. But my favorite movie quote of all time is when in Miracle, where Kurt Russell, kid hurt his leg, and he said that's a long way from the heart. Basically toughen up and get going. Well, Jordan's shoulders hurt, so that's not like such a long way from the heart. So like he gets a little bit of a pass there, but now it's his non-throwing shoulder. I mean, I think it is still bruised and hurt, but I mean, shoot that thing up and go out there and tough it out.
Keep him from playing.
Yeah, tough it out for 3 hours, and then you've got a bye week next week, and then I think you've got Virginia Tech after that, and so you could really take like 3 weeks off if you need to, and be fine. So yeah, hurt but not injured.
No, I saw what he did in that third quarter. So I mean, in that second half after you got hurt. So I know it's not going to keep him out of the game.
All our fans were like, "Oh no, he's going to be gone for Clemson." He comes out like on the first play of the second half and throws like a 50-yard pad. I was just like, "Y'all shut up!" Like all the Twitter doctors that had him out for the year. So anyway,
yeah, back off the ledge just a little bit. You're not quite there yet.
Yeah,
it's great.
But, well, I mean, all there is left to do now is for the two teams to put the helmets on, tighten the chin straps, and let's go to war on Saturday. And thankfully, we won't have to wait too very long on Saturday to see it happen. So for those of us, I unfortunately won't be there Saturday, but for those of us who don't have to get up early and go to the game, then Saturday will be my morning to sleep a little bit late, get up about 10 o'clock and run a few errands, come home, throw the TV on, and it's game time. So we won't have to wait too terribly long. But should be a fun one. TJ, we appreciate you coming on and lending your thoughts from the Florida State perspective. We can say it in the spirit of sportsmanship. Good luck, and we hope it's injury-free ball game, and we hope it lives up to the hype that we all projected it to be before the season started.
Yeah, I mean, Florida State fans, would love nothing more than, I mean, Clemson fans too, right? Like, would love nothing more than to just coast to an easy victory. But it's been a long time since we've had one of these. It's really, really fun. So yeah, I'm all with it. I hope we come out on top at the end. So not too much luck, but but a good game is fine with me.
Yeah,
no doubt about it.
Yeah.
TJ Pittenger from Double Fries No Slaw podcast. He's been a great guest, and we appreciate you again coming on around the call tonight. And we'll be back next week, and hopefully we're talking about a Clemson victory, and hopefully TJ is ruining a Florida State loss on their podcast over there. But it's all in fun. That's why they call it a rivalry, and we're going to have fun on Saturday afternoon regardless of what happens. So for Garrett Mitchell, Griffin Barfield, Clifton Kennedy, and TJ Pittenger from Double Fries No Slaw over on the Florida State side, appreciate you watching in, listening in tonight. Go Tigers, and we'll catch you next week.
Yeah, go Tigers.
Tigers.
Thanks, guys. Go Noles.